Hello everyone, I'm Becky Goldsmith with Piece of Cake, and this is Searching for Beauty Video 5. In this video, I'm going to show you how to applique this shape. This might be a sort of longish video. I'll do my best not to make it too long. So, I've got the block ready. I've already appliqued 7 of the 8 little pieces, number 1 pieces. My block is right side up on top of the sandpaper board. The sandpaper will keep the background from shifting as I position this shape on it. I've got my overlay mostly in position on top of the block. But before I slide this shape underneath, I need to finger press it. To finger press, what you do is this. You hold the shape that has been trimmed with a 3/16 inch seam allowance. So I've got it in my hand and I'm turning the line that marks the edge of the applique to the back. When I get to this inner point, I'm going to finger press beyond the inner point into the applique shape. I'm going to turn it in my hand and do the same thing on the other side. As I go around this outer curve, I can only use the fingers on one hand because 4 fingers is too many fingers. But as I get around to the flatter part, I can let the fingers of my other hand join in because there's room for them. Here I'm going to jump back to 2 fingers. All I'm doing is turning the drawn line to the back. Where the finger pressed crease is, that's the turn line. That's where my fabric will turn when I sew it. I'm going to finger press that inner point in the same manner that I did on the other side. This one step will make your needle turn applique so much easier because the seam allowance will know where you want it to go as you turn it under. Let me back this back out just a little bit. So I have lined up the horizontal and vertical center lines on my overlay with my pieced background. I'm right-handed, so I'm holding the overlay in position on top of the sandboard. With my left hand, I'm going to lift the overlay up and move the shape into position. If I need to refine it any, I'll use the point of my scissors, but that actually looks pretty good. Let me zoom in. You can see the line that marks the edge of the applique falls outside of the drawn line on the overlay as it should. I've pre-washed and dried in the washer and dryer all my fabrics. So if I give it a little tap here and pull the overlay back, my fabric will stay in position. If you did not pre-wash your fabric, be careful when you remove the overlay because it is likely to, your fabric may shift against each other. Because if the sizing and finishes are still in your fabric, they slide against each other more. I'm using pins for my little tiny pin cushion. I happen to, there's a free pattern for this, by the way, on the website underneath free patterns. It's my favorite pin cushion. It's just handy. Anyway, back to this. I'm using the Karen K. Buckley shorter perfect pins. They're really flexible. They're kind of hard to use, and I just like them for this. They're very nice on these larger pieces. They cover a lot of distance. The head of the pin is so small that even if your thread hangs up, it's easy to get off. Notice that I'm pinning so that the bulk of the shaft of the pin is parallel to the line that I'm going to be sewing. I would not place my pins perpendicular to the line. They just don't work as well if you do that. So keep your pins parallel to the line you're sewing. If I was using shorter pins, my pins would be a little bit closer to the edge of the chalk. I would have them about 1/4 of an inch away. But these pins are longer and these are curved edges, so if I move the pin too close, it doesn't work as well. But again, I've pre-washed my fabric, so having my pin, it's a little more in many places than 1/4 of an inch. Having it that far away is going to work okay for me on this shape. What you want to look for as you're sewing is be sure that as you hold your applique in your hand, the fabric doesn't move out of position as you are sewing. Ooh, and I don't have a pin. I've got a needle. I'll stop this and I'll be right back. I'm back. I've got my easy needle threader and I'm using a very fine needle, so I'm going to use the small size of the easy threader. I've got my packets of thread. This is the Masterpiece 50 weight 2-ply off the bobbin. It's a 3-ply off of the spool, so be sure you get it off the bobbin. And you'd think that that bright orange would be the best choice, but it really isn't on this fabric. I've been using the one from the soft set. This orange blends better to my eye. So I've got my bobbin. I'm going to drop my needle, and I'm using the number 11 tulip applique needle. The eye end has been dropped down into the easy threader. I'm going to hold my thread tight, pop it down into the easy threader. I've got about 1.5 inches of thread there. Press it not too hard, not too soft. There's the loop of thread sticking out. I'm going to grab it, pull, and then grab it there. And now my needle is threaded. And I'm going to cut the thread, put that back in the box where it goes. Here's my knot. There is a whole video on how to make this knot, so I'm not going to go into great detail here. I'm going to wrap 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Grab the thread wraps with your fingers. Take the needle, make sure you grab the thread and pull, and there's the knot. As I said, I've got a variety of videos on how to make the invisible stitch, longer videos, older videos, but longer videos. So if you want much more detail on any of this, just click around on the YouTube channel or on my website. There are links there. All right, I'm going to move the sandboard out from underneath so that it's prettier underneath there. Now, I've brought my needle up underneath the applique fabric. That way the knot and the tail of thread will be hidden as I use my needle to turn the seam allowance under, and it will turn right on that finger pressed fold. Here's the stitch. Let me see here. Maybe you would like it if I got even closer. Let's see if the camera stays focused there. All right, so I'm going down with the needle right next to where the thread has come out of the applique. I'm going straight down. I'm touching the end of my middle fingertip underneath that background. Now I'm going to let my hand fall to the right. As the needle travels over my fingertip to the left, following the edge of the applique, and then on the upward stitch, I'm catching the applique. So you go down next to the applique, travel under the background, right to left, bend over the underneath finger, and push the needle through the background and the applique at the same time. Reposition your fingers. There is a whole lot going on here, and yes, I guess I am going to walk you through it. This one video may turn into 2 videos or 3 videos. So here we go. Notice the way I'm holding my needle. This finger, my index finger, is at the eye end of the needle. I'm holding the shaft of the needle with my middle finger and thumb. It is a 3-finger grip. It is not a 2-finger grip. It is not a sideways grip. It's just like this. And what that allows me to do is keep the motion this motion right here is happening in my forearm, right there. So if you do this with your arm, if you just hold your hand out, woo, if you just hold your arm out in front of you with me, just hold your arm. So your forearm is next to your body and you've got a 90-degree bend at the elbow with your arm pointing out. Just turn your hand like this. Notice that your elbow stays right next to your body. Your shoulder is fine. You can keep your shoulder relaxed. That's the motion. If you hold your needle with the needle going into the side of your middle finger and you're going sideways with your stitch, if I tell you to put your needle straight down into the fabric, try that. See what happens. Your elbow will leave your side. Your shoulder, it'll come up nearly almost out like a scarecrow. It's too much work on your rotator cuff. It's not a good thing. And if you don't move your shoulder, if you just move from side to side, what happens is this. Let me come back in. If your stitch, when you make it, is only a little whip stitch, you run the danger of making a stitch that instead of going in right where you're supposed to go in, a lot of times people wander over to the left of the entry point and they go sideways, and instead of really bending over that underneath finger, they have a tendency to slide in from the side. Here, let me make it like this. If your stitches, can you see where the shaft of the needle is coming through the background and then it's traveling, so you can see it catch the light. It travels a little bit before it ultimately comes out of the applique over here. If those are your stitches, when you pull your thread, everything's going to gather up there. It's too loose a stitch. You can try this. When I make my applique stitches, when I go straight down and I travel to the left, bend over that underneath finger and come as straight up as I can through those layers, and I pull my thread through and I pull my thread tight, it does not gather up. If when you pull your thread tight, everything gathers up, what you're doing is making like a running stitch instead of an invisible stitch. I know that a lot of people like wearing a thimble on their middle finger and they like making their stitch sideways. And there are a variety of ways. I mean, we're all individuals and we have different body mechanics going on. It requires, I think, it's certainly more effort on my part to find the place and really bend over. Now, can you do that? Yes, it is technically possible to make a good stitch that way, but you have to pay attention to what you're doing. Perhaps it's from years of long time doing this, that is a faster, more direct, easier on all of my arm and joints kind of motion. But I will acknowledge that it may not be true for everyone. The main thing is make sure that when you start your stitch, you insert your needle right there, right next to where the thread has come out of the fabric. And that when you come up, you really come up through the background and the edge of the applique without there being a gap or an angle there. You don't want to travel sideways through those layers of fabric. So I'm going to pull this through. Now, regardless of how you hold the needle, whether you switch to the way I think is the way I like it or a different way, pay attention to what you're doing with your holding hand. I really think you get a much better stitch and a more uniform stitch if you hold your applique, and I'm sewing into the end of my bottom finger there. You can see my callus forming. I'm sewing pretty much into the end of my thumb. So the needle, as I hold it, would be in line with the bones that run down my thumb. And to get my thumb in that position, I just wad up however much of the block I need to wad up to get there. So here we go. I'm going to go straight down. See where that thumbnail is? As I bend over and come up, where my thumbnail is pinching down, that's how long my stitch is. You don't want a stitch that is super, super, super tiny. But by the same token, a stitch that's, say, 1/8 of an inch or longer, well, that's really not a short enough stitch. And all you have to do is check. You can look at your applique. You can kind of pull on it. If it seems gappy, your stitch is too long. All right. I am to the place here where I need to clip. And you know what I'm going to do, because this has taken just a little bit of time. I'm going to stop here and I will come back with the next video and talk to you about how to sew inner points. And that will take a little while, and you might want to watch it more than once. And then I'll do the next video showing you how to deal with the pleats that can form on outer curves. So this is video 5. There'll be maybe 5.1. Let's call this video 5.1. I'll be back with video 5.2 in not very long. So thank you for watching. May you continue to have many happy stitches.